Well, there's this thing going around, just kick the tripod. um, World Economic Forum showing them in a meeting talking about how people all over the world they've done this study or poll or whatever, finding people all over the world, not just the US, do not trust science. And I've got a little bit of beef with this. First of all, I don't think that that people don't trust science. You like my shirt? Oldest gave me that. Awesome. If you would like to have one, put a comment below and let me know, and I'll connect you. I'll try to figure out how to connect you with my friend who makes these. Anyway, World Economic Forum's got this thing going on. And that they had this meeting, and people all over the world do not trust science. And I have a little bit of beef with that. I think they are interpreting things just a little bit off. Number one, it was encouraging to me that people are questioning things, that people all over the world are questioning things, not just Americans, because we need to question things. Number two, the whole premise of science, period, and that's all I've ever wanted to be since I was a little bitty girl. All I wanted to be was a scientist and have lots of pretty dresses. Okay, that's so. My plan before I met Mr. Awesome was to become a nuclear astrophysicist with a minor in psychology. So science, period, end of story. My thing. All right. And it's not that I don't trust the science, it's that science is never an end all last word to any question or argument. Never. And people are trying to use it that way. People have been trying to use it that way and say the science says this, and that's the end of the argument. Well, that's not how science works. Science, in and of itself, is always questionable. Always. You can always question it. That's what makes science so much fun, is that you can question it. The whole idea of science is encouraging questions and not taking anybody's word for it. If it is true science, it's not only questionable, you can question it, it's also you can experiment. You can actually do it yourself. You can do the research. You can that's the idea. Anything with science should be a repeatable experiment. And depending on the purpose, the objective of the experiment or the study or whatever, depending on the objective and what the particular scientist or group of scientists are expecting to see, is how they interpret the data that they get out of their experiment research study. That is how science works. You have an objective. You have, I wonder about this, and if I did this, would this happen? And there's usually a goal in mind. Okay, so the idea that science says this, therefore this, you know, argument is over, is completely against the whole idea of science in the first place. You can take the same study and you can take a completely different objective, and all science has, and I've said this before, all science begins with certain, the brain just went south, uh, assumptions. All science begins with certain assumptions. Okay, so it doesn't matter what you're doing, you're assuming something in order to get the science. A lot of math is that way too. Again, math, my thing. Math begins with assumptions. You have to assume some things. And a lot of times those assumptions are things that they're just widely accepted that this is a fact. But it isn't necessarily. And then people get hung up, and I probably ought to do another video on this one, on truth. And truth versus fact is different things. Well, whose truth? Well, no, if we're talking about facts, let's talk about facts. The truth that somebody pulls out of those facts, or the truth that somebody puts into those facts, is a completely can be a completely different thing. Okay, facts don't necessarily make truth. Truth doesn't necessarily come from fact. Okay, so that can be a whole nother discussion. But it's the same way with science. Just because they say, well, science proves it, science never proves anything. Science never proves anything. Science experiments on things. Science studies things. Science takes in information. And a scientist, or somebody looking at the paper and examining the data, comes to a conclusion. Okay, a person comes to a conclusion. Science never comes to a conclusion. Okay, there are conclusions and things around us. If this happens, then this dies. That's a conclusion, to a point. But okay, well, if we do not as much of this, then do we have the same conclusion? So I mean, a little bit of poison might not come to the same conclusion, may just make you sick, compared to a lot of poison may make you more than sick, take you on to glory. So, science, depending on the purpose and what you're going for. So I don't think, as far as this, going back to the economic forum thing, I don't think that it's that people don't trust science. People don't trust, and they were coming to the conclusion that people feel like science has been politicized. Science has always been, and the point was made that science has always been politicized, and Galileo was their example. And yeah, absolutely. Science has always been politicized. Science has always been used for profit. So politics and profit, politics and money, and they're usually wrapped up in the same stuff. So the conclusions, and somebody's like, oh, the science means this or that. No. It depends on the objective and the conclusion, what the objective was in the first place, and who's making the conclusion, and what assumptions there were in the process. Okay? And you can take the exact same experiment. You can start with a different objective, different assumptions, and come up with completely different conclusions. And different scientists can come up with different conclusions as well, because we all have a bias. We all have preconceived ideas. We all do. You're not going to get past that. I don't care how scientific you get. You are not going to go into something without a bias and preconceived notions. Okay? Everybody has assumptions based on preconceived notions. And this is the way science works. So it's not that people don't trust science. It's that they are beginning to realize that science can be interpreted different ways. That the conclusion isn't always the conclusion that we're going to come up with. And just because somebody doesn't have the PhD and the quote-unquote education does not mean that they can't read and understand or even reproduce the experiment themselves. Okay? And that is the part that kind of irritates me, as far as these highfalutin, highly educated, because they were saying even uneducated people are having this. Well, no, duh. People are dying because they are trusting. I hope I don't get knocked off for saying that. People are going on to glory. This is just for educational and entertainment purposes only, TikTok. Because they have been blindly trusting, and they're done. And that's a good thing.